everybody knows the form of animation known as stop motion animation. And if you're at all a fan like I am, you know the major players. There are animation studios all over the world. There's the famous Leica studios up in Portland. They did Kubo and the Two Strings and Coraline, or Aardman Animation out of England. We've filmed there. They made Shaun the Sheep and the Wallace and Gromit films. But very few names rise to the top of stop motion, except for the name Henry Selick, director of Nightmare Before Christmas, Coraline, Monkey Bone, James and the Giant Peach. Henry is a literal god of this industry, and he has just directed his first film since Coraline, and his collaboration with Jordan Peele called Wendell Wild. It is a beautiful, beautiful movie, and Henry brought some of the props and pieces made for that film here to the cave to tell me about the process of putting it together. Henry, thank you so much for joining me in the cave.
Good to see you again, Adam.
You have never been here, and we've actually never worked together, but I will tell you that you are partially responsible for my whole career.
How's that?
Because you had hired every model maker that could breathe in San Francisco on Nightmare Before Christmas. You had a couple of hundred of them working full-time in the early 90s when I was looking for work, and Jamie hired me because he couldn't find anybody else. So thank you.
Sure.
And then, you worked with my mentor, Mitch Romanowski, on Nightmare and on Peach. And we have chewed on a lot of the same mud over the years.
Yes, we have.
Congratulations on the film, on Wendell Wild. I watched it last night. It is so beautiful. It is so heartfelt. And I have so many questions, but you brought these puppets. And now I'm looking at the puppet, and all I want to talk about is what madness caused you to do a feather stole on a character for stop motion animation?
It was more important to me, and I convinced the costumers and puppet makers that it's more important to me have this kind of texture that you get from this kind of a stole than to have smooth and perfect animation. That sometimes, a texture can mean more. And since I'm trying to show off it's really stop motion animation. These are puppets. We're not trying to hide it so deep that it looks like CG. I don't think it's a problem if there's some shimmy or shake in the course of watching an actor come to life.
Well, and I was reading an interview with you about this the other day, and you were saying that nowadays you could do animatics with CG to such a degree that you could almost lose that the animation becomes so smooth it hides its origins, and you wanted to be able to see that slight flashing of materials that happens.
Yeah, I want to embrace certain things, and we always do, new tech and new ways, but at the heart of stop motion, it's animators wrestling a puppet to life, a frame at a time. I don't want to hide that so deep, you don't know that.
I also felt, watching the film, and this is my first global perspective upon finishing it, was there's so much texture to the interiors. It might be the most elaborate set of interiors ever made for a stop motion film. I mean, the hallways and the stairways and the beat up doors and the neighborhoods and the exteriors and the interiors, it all felt, there's basically just more world building than I expected to see. I was really blown away.
I appreciate it. There's plenty of world building, especially on the interiors. Exteriors, we often added backgrounds later.
Sure.
Just, we didn't have we couldn't build all the sets enormous, but there's also, on the sets, there's a lot of treatments to give them a sense of history or use or abuse.
Yeah.
So I think we took that idea farther than maybe the other films I've worked on.
It looked like your scenic department had a lot of fun with weathering and aging and bringing stuff down. So I'm curious, I'm familiar with the old Schramm stop motion puppets with an armature inside. I'm assuming these have a very similar type of armature, but did you experiment with new materials for the characters for this film?
Yeah, from the beginning of the stop motion animation I've been involved with till now, lots of changes and adjustments, but at the heart, there's still a really beautifully machined metal armature inside, with custom types of joints that can be tensioned, can be adjusted for the individual animator so that they can, move through all the joints, bring the puppet to life, adjusting, shoulders and elbows up and down,
And this is, you're describing adjusting like multiple sets of joints so that the animator can pull maybe a whole limb and it moves together. So they're moving all those tensions.
Yeah. So not much has changed there. I mean, it goes back to Tom Sanneman, who designed. He was a incredible stop motion animator, but he was also the best armature builder in the world. And I happened to meet up with him. He helped me do some MTVs. Then he came on board as both an animator and the main armature maker for Nightmare. And then other people, worked with him, good teams of people, but Merrick Cheney became his main acolyte. Yeah. He brought in CNC, I guess, milling machines to help make the parts.
Oh, those, I was at Merrick's shop a couple of years ago and I asked to see some of the original skeleton clevises and the sensitivity. I mean, and it's an 1/8 inch of, I think it's even less than that. Yeah. It's like, 80 thousandths of steel, but with a hinge and a tensionable hinge.
And but from that, where there's been some new improvements, not so much beyond the armatures. You always had to have armatures where the feet could support the puppet, where you're going to screw down the foot onto a set and it had to support the whole weight of the puppet. So a big heavy puppet like Oogie Boogie had to have big feet, have to have a massive armature inside it was like, 1,000 calorie loss per minute on the animator, wrestling and sweating to bring to life. But one of the main things that's changed is we can have a character like Irmgard. She's a murderess in our film and the worst of the villains. She can have tiny, tiny little feet because they don't have to support her anymore. We can put a metal rig that supports her full body weight. We can suspend it from some kind of a model mover above. Wow. We can program in, sort of an up and down, whatever, because we're shooting digitally. We have since Coraline. We'll shoot a clean pass, and then we can digitally paint out the whole rig. And now we don't have to hang characters from spider wire to make them fly or leap. We have a much better way to go. And the character designs can be a lot more extreme, which I love.
That's amazing. I remember hearing stories about how the spider's web from Peach would flash every morning after they turn on the lights. But so when you are making this decision about what rawness of the animation and the process to leave in, is this something you have to educate the studio on every single time?
Not so much the studio. I didn't really fill them in too much. I didn't want them like overly concerned. Mm-hmm. It was more about working people making the film, the animation supervisors. I worked with Malcolm Lamont, Jeff Riley. They're some of the world's greatest stop motion animators, and they came in as supervisors because there was a lot of younger people who didn't have a lot of experience, and with them as supervisors, they're going to bring everybody up to a certain level. Mm-hmm. And we just, the age-old question, why do stop motion anymore? What's the point of it? And, one of the main things is like, well, we don't want to hide it too much. We don't want people to be overly confused. Think it's CG and it's perfect and smooth and lubricated and all that. So how do we do that? And we just had to make a lot of certain choices. Going back to Jack Skellington, every single expression and every in-between, between those expressions was first a drawing from a really good 2D animator and then a sculpture. Every single one of those was hand sculpted, and then we'd make a mold and we could, spit out plastic and paint it and so forth.
These are 7 of these, but for Jack, you had hundreds and hundreds, or was it over
We had probably
1,000?
we probably had about 300.
300 separate sculpts.
He couldn't do everything. He doesn't have eyeballs.
Right.
That saved a lot. But we were looking for ways to improve, and Martin Meunier and myself, how did we work in early days on Coraline at a place down in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. The owner bought one of the first 3D printers, and we had this light bulb. You know what? Instead of sculpting every single one of these by hand, we could just do the key expressions, scan it into the computer. The computer can create the in-betweens, and then we'll print them out. And so that became a labor-saving way to approach it. But it was always very important to me that it start with at least a 2D drawing. I didn't want to build it all in the computer. But the second idea was, if we split the faces, the upper and lowers, then we can multiply the number of expressions.
Right.
Because it's not, every single one has to have a complete new, eyelids and so forth.
Where all the eye makeup has to match for
Yeah.
every single one.
So that was the other idea. And on Coraline, that's how most of the characters' faces were made. Sometimes we still do rubber faces over wire or, metal armatures that we push around slowly. And, depending on the character. But
Right.
I wanted to leave the seam in back then to show it. But, it was too scary for the supporters of the film.
So you painted it out.
Yeah. But on this film, we're going to leave that in. We're going to not fix all the mistakes.
Yeah.
Instead of shooting 24 separate poses a second all the time, we're going to rough it up a little more and shoot 12 per second, sometimes 8 per second.
I was wondering about that. I thought I noticed some alternate timings watching the film.
Yeah, and supporting characters like all the girls at the school, they're very crude and simple puppets. They didn't need to, you don't need to care about them or know them, but they have unique shapes. And so they're just made more crudely and animated more crudely.
Oh, you must be able then to, because you can shoot clean digital passes, you could animate characters in the same scene separately and composite them later?
Sometimes we do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would just, here's our main characters, and then here's background.
Right.
And so we would shoot those separately and then comp them together.
So if I remember correctly, the mayor in Nightmare had replaceable mouths. Like that was a kind of one of the gags about him.
Yeah.
And I noticed the seams on the characters' faces, and I love that you left them there. That is it. There's a way in which the exhibits built at the Exploratorium here in the city feel like hugs to me, because you can see all the kids sweat and all the different repairs that have done. That always feels like a hug. And I think the same thing when I see the artifacts of manufacture.
Yeah, I'm glad you feel that way. I mean, we've had decades of perfect CG animation, CG effects for live action, and a little sense of handmade becomes fresh and new in a way.
Yeah. What about the bodies? Is it, may I touch?
Yeah.
Is it, okay, so it's like a urethane?
We used to use this foam rubber SRAM. It was a special recipe. It was very light and
Like
lifelike.
makeup sponge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would start to oxidize, turn to crumbles within like 2 weeks of using it. Like for makeup, you can't just have one false nose. You'd have to make 100 because they're going to wear out. We started using silicones, which are heavier, which we don't want, but they last so much longer. There's something called dragon skin.
Yeah, I love that
You
stuff.
know about it.
Yeah, very fireproof.
Yeah, very, very stretchy. So, puppets, going back to like James the Giant Peach that I own, they're sort of crumbling a little bit away on the outside, but these last almost the life of the show. The hands don't, because the hands still have little wires in them, and eventually the wires poke through, so we always have replacement.
And can the hands be replaced separately?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, we were always looking for a place like the watch and the bracelets.
So tell me about
or
this.
Sleeve. Yeah.
The watch and the bracelet has a level of detail that I find shocking. Are these actually metallic? Are they 3D printed metal?
We use whatever we can. I mean, we actually have artists who can make beautiful handmade stuff that small out of metal. And sometimes I love what you can get with 3D printing, which is incredibly small detail. Often in the past, you zoom in on stop motion, and then the lack of detail kind of gives it away and can feel too clunky. But it's both a combination of people who actually work that small, who love working that small, or 3D printers. Often for the metal, we can't really get it with the paint, and we'll use real metal.
Wow. And just, okay. I'm curious about the character design. It's really, really singular, and the ways in which each of the characters is drawn feels both like a very 2D caricature realized as 3D. Tell me about the process of character design.
At the very beginning, when I first met up with my creative collaborator, Jordan Peele, I wanted Wendell Wild to be caricatures of him and Keegan-Michael Key. They were, comedy partners on the show Key and Peele, which is
One of the best.
one of the best shows in history.
Yeah.
And by the third season, it inspired me to take out my old 7-page story and sketch of my boys when they were young as demons, and pitch an idea to go.
Wait, so you're set? Wait, were your sons twins?
No, they're not twins.
Okay, but your young sons were the initial inspiration for the demons. That totally checks out.
I remember getting a brand new guitar. I play guitar when I have time. A brand new Martin guitar in its case, and it's out in the living room. The same day I got it, and I started hearing this thump, 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 and I walk out, and there's 2-year-old George jumping again and again from the fireplace onto the top of it because it makes a nice sound.
Right. It resonates.
He didn't break it. He didn't break it.
Okay, good.
But kids are demons.
They are.
Sometimes, and we love them, but they're demons. So I did a sketch of them as demons. George was like 2, still in his pull-up diapers. Harry was about 6. And then I wrote a little story about them. That's 20 years ago.
Wow.
But that's what I brought out of mothballs.
Yeah.
When I met up with Jordan. They didn't like the idea that much.
Huh.
They thought it could be stupid, like, political cartoons with big heads and little bodies, or boardwalk caricature artists. But I had a secret artist. It's not secret at all. Very well-known Pablo Lobato, who's from Argentina, who I think makes the most beautiful and artistic caricatures in the world. He's been doing it forever. Music stars, celebrities, politicians, people from the past and the present. I reached out to him. His English was better than my Spanish, thank God. And he happened to be coming to Los Angeles, and I was going there, and we met up. I talked about the project, and I asked him, would you consider doing some work? I was going to pay him out of my pocket. He said, no, I'd like to be involved. So he worked for free for a while, and he did some great caricatures of Key and Peele as demons, and I took it to those guys, and they said, oh, we get it.
Wow.
We're good. We're good with this. And ultimately, Pablo designed all the characters. Some are like James Hong, who does Father Bass. Everyone knows James Hong. He's like 92 or 3 now, still active.
Amazing.
And he said he gave his approval for it. And then others are caricatures, indirect caricatures, like Lane Claxon, her husband. It originally was inspired a little bit by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But then that had turned into Boris Johnson. But then people kept getting elected who we did inspiration, so we changed it. So there's a little bit of that in his wig. The trickiest thing of all, though, is that Pablo's work, you could look him up now, you'd find great things. It's very flat. It's very Picasso-esque. It's like, just perfect at capturing the likeness. But that was a challenge.
Translating that to 3D.
Yeah, translating that. Real challenge. So initially, our first scene we did was the demons in the underworld. We figured, well, their bodies will be dimensional. Their faces will be more flattened bas relief. We found a way that looked good, and it worked. But I also realized, every character in the film doing it that way, I think will feel gimmicky. And it turned out that Pablo could actually translate his designs to be more dimensional.
Oh, wow.
And it took time, but he adapted his style.
Yeah.
And then ultimately he was doing like key poses of he contributed so much
amazing
to the look and personalities of our characters. And he was doing all the key expressions. I still like to work with 2D animators who can hand draw. Mm-hmm. They know the faces we need. They might do a rough pass, but then Pablo would Pabloize it.
Right.
And from Pablo's look for characters, I worked with Lou Romano, a very talented production designer, who his work naturally kind of fits with Pablo's. And at the beginning, he kind of fleshed out the world around the Pablo's.
Now, when you say that you took those characters to Jordan Peele and he and Key were just like, yep, that's great. That speaks to a sort of a good shorthand, trust-based relationship. Is that how you found collaborating with Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key?
Yeah, collaborating with both of them on their dialogue and what are the right voices for the characters was incredible fun. It was like our first session is just playtime because they can do anything, but you don't want everything. And so it was finding ways, and we have recordings, hours and hours of recordings that would be like amazing comedy albums of their outtakes.
Of just them riffing at each other.
As them one-upping each other like nobody's business. They could take like the pronunciation of a word and turn that into a whole act.
Wow.
And, but eventually, we find everyone in agreement. Yeah, this is who they are. And then we build from there. But the thing about Jordan was when I reached out to those guys, they both were interested in doing a voice, but Jordan wanted to meet. Well, that's great. I'm a huge fan of what they're doing on their show. And, it turns out he knows all about stop motion. He knows everything I've done and every stop motion film I've ever done.
He's a total fan.
Yeah, he knows it. In fact, the animated logo for their company, Monkey Paw, which came a few years later, is all stop motion animation. Yeah. So that was like a huge deal. And then after I pitched the story and he looked at the pages, he got back and said, look, I love this. I'd love to be involved as doing more. I'd love to collaborate with you and be a producer. He started selling me on this new company he was putting together, Monkey Paw Productions. And everything he said sounded great to me. And we got to work. He had, he wanted me to shift who the protagonist was. He made good sense that it not be Sister Helly, that it be Kat.
Yeah.
That she should be a person of color. He let me choose. I said, well, she's going to be African-American then. And it just sort of, he brought himself to it, respecting what I was bringing.
Yeah.
It was really just kind of perfect. There was no push, but we just sort of got it from each other.
Yeah.
And then he had to go, we're working on the story and the characters and Pablo's doing his work. And then he said, yeah, I got a green light on this little horror film. So I got to go away for a little while.
Dude, that was Get Out.
It's Get Out. And then he wraps it up and it's going to be out in a week. He freaks out and says, well, we got to go out. We got to set Wendell Wild this week. What if my movie's a bomb?
Yeah.
I said, well, you can't worry about that. And it's, no, of course we're not going to go out because people want to wait and see what you did.
Yeah.
And I'd read the script, but I hadn't seen the film. That comes out. It's amazing. It's done for this much money. Makes that much. Hollywood loves someone like that. And then we were able to set it up. Netflix was the best place because they said, we will make this. We're not going to just develop it.
Yeah.
We'll make this. They gave us, we wanted a PG-13 just to give us some playroom. And then it took some years to get the thing done.
And all this is because you were watching Key and Peele and loved their stuff enough and thought, I want to play with these guys.
Yeah, I probably was done. I had a success with Coraline, based on Neil Gaiman's great book. I had set up another project with Disney and Pixar, but that went belly up. We were in production, went belly up, and I was like, I think this might be it for my career. But that show, what they were doing inspired me so much. It's like I came back from the dead.
Wow.
And reached out, and guess what? They wanted to do it. Jordan wanted to do more, and I think we got something pretty special at the end.
I'm curious, over all the films that you made, I'm sure each one, at the end of each one, there's some challenge rises to the top of like, that was the challenge of that film. I'm curious what new challenges this film presented that you hadn't encountered before.
To tell you the truth, most of the challenges were just the outside things. The pandemic.
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
We all had to deal with the COVID in our ways. Remember, it was scary shit.
Yeah.
People are dying. A lot of people were dying.
Yeah.
No one knows exactly how it's transmitted. So we had just started production And then we had to shut down. It's like, well, what can we still do from home? Because we can't all just put computers in people's houses and still make a film.
Yeah.
Those who could still worked. Netflix did an amazing thing. They paid everybody, whether they could work or not, to hold them for about 8 months. And so we didn't lose anybody. And then we had to come back and ramp up very slowly. You know, the safety protocols and masks and not more than this many people in a room.
Right.
Wipe downs every day, new air filtration systems and all of that, which doesn't, make things go any faster.
No. For an already slow process.
Yeah, for slow process. And, we have fires up. I've made both Coraline and Wendell Wild up in Oregon. It's just that's where the stop motion center of North America is.
Yeah.
Normally you don't get big forest fires there. We get fires in California, the whole state these days.
Yeah.
But they started getting them. 2 summers ago, we had a fire coming towards the studio. So close, we had to evacuate the puppets. We figured, well, if it burns down the studio, we could still keep the film going if we had our actors and we could rebuild sets. Luckily, I mean, people couldn't breathe. It was so bad. So, that happened. We had something called a heat dome where we were the hottest place on earth.
I remember that.
Yeah.
The smoke must have affected your actual lighting inside.
Yeah, we had that. We had ice storms. Yeah, it was like the old God of the Old Testament was
Right.
really giving us a Job job, throwing whatever could against us. But no, we kept the faith and came up the other side. As far as technical challenges, things like that, very difficult scenes, but nothing harder than things we'd done before.
I was watching, I guess in one scene, a character walks in and you do this a few times in the film, cut to a top shot of the room. And I found myself looking at the room and thinking, where's the animator leaning in? What wall is he coming through? And these aren't animated by a single animator by any stretch. There's how many key animators did you have on the crew?
Most scenes, even if it's multiple characters, are animated by one.
Just one? Okay.
Yeah, I used to try to get more to interact. Occasionally it'll be a foreground 1, 2, or 3 characters and then background ones. We'll shoot them separately, comp it together. We had about 15 superstar animators that could take on anything, and another 10 that were very good, but they were younger and coming up.
Right.
Then a handful of assistants beyond that. We had as much as 30 sets going at once.
Whoa.
Not necessarily all being animated,
Yeah.
because sometimes you're like bringing in a new set or getting rid of an old one. But this wasn't constant. This is what we built up to. So at peak production, we got that many plates spinning.
I touched her earring earlier and noticed that even this tiny, tiny piece of piano wire that you've got allows that earring to be moved across.
Yeah, if she's going to whip her head around, you want to be able to have it settle.
I'm tired just looking at it. Also, I'm glad they're no longer made out of SRAM. I have I turned SRAM yellow. I have piss hands. I'm not allowed to touch it. I learned that running SRAM with Mitch. Tell me.
I can't touch gold.
You can't touch gold?
Yeah.
Really?
Too acidic.
Really?
Turns green. I had a guitar with gold, tuning pegs. And like, what's happening? It's corroding.
Yeah, I'm a similar acidic skin. I wanted to talk about this beautiful puppet.
Yeah.
I love his. Tell me about the fact that his feet aren't attached to his body. It's not dealt with narratively, and I find it the metaphor is really compelling, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I mean, we go deep, deep, deep. There's a backstory for everybody, why something is, I want to know.
Yeah.
Even if it's never explained, it's just, sometimes it's useful to tell an animator, or whatever. So there's a specific reason, why he lost his lower legs. It was having to do with him getting that magical little bear, Beelzebub.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a price he had to pay. And it's very interesting. I won't get into it now because maybe we'll save that.
Fair enough.
But there is a backstory. But he just prefers having these fake feet down here rather than nothing. And he makes a point of smashing them occasionally. You know, when he's accusing Helly of quitting, you're my right foot of justice and you quit on me. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's, people have mixed feelings about him. Is he a villain? Is he a good guy? He's both.
I appreciated that.
Yeah.
At first he felt like a villain, and then I really noted the eyes felt really unique to me in the film. You have, they've gone through so many iterations over stop motion animation from Will Vinton's original little holes that he put the paper clip in. But it looks like you have this clear plastic over them, and they just felt so real. Like I kept noticing reflections in the eyes.
Yeah, we make the eyes for this film in a variety of ways. In some cases, it's actually just a big cartoon shiny disc with no depth at all. In others, we use a resin, and there is some depth inside to catch the light.
Yeah.
It's just sort of depending on the character. With Kat and her design, we ended up making, even though she's more realistic and she has a lot of expressiveness and expressions, but the eyes, the irises worked better for her, more as discs, but that can catch light and reflections. Other characters get the deeper look with color and so forth. It's just, I've never found one solution is going to work for every character.
Right. And when you're designing each of these characters, you have to not just design for the expression, but they also have to be engineered. You have to be able to get to those pieces.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. Is it at all possible to pull off the lower half of his face on this puppet? Does he?
It certainly is, but I don't want to do that.
Fair enough.
That's for later.
Okay. Totally fair enough. I just always want to see behind the curtain. Are they held?
You'll have to have me come back in a year.
Okay, done.
Yeah.
Is it magnets? Are they held?
Yeah, it's a system that Martin Meunier developed. How do we quickly and easily replace faces? You know, we used to like friction.
Yeah.
Is it museum gel? Whatever. And he discovered these super tiny, very powerful magnets. And that's the way we do it. Sometimes there'll be an overlap between the, upper face and lower, so it has to be done in order. But yeah, tiny magnets.
When you've watched the film now hundreds and hundreds of times, when you watch it now, what do you hope people notice about it? Not just about the takeaway message, but like about the film itself.
What's my takeaway? I hope that people feel this is different. It's intriguing. They want to find out what happens because it's not maybe too predictable.
It's dangerous. It feels, I was impressed with how scary it is. The nearest analog I was thinking of was in a way sort of Spirited Away, where it's both incredibly loving, but also really complicatedly upsetting at some moments.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite Miyazaki films, Spirited Away. No doubt it's affected me and what I do. But I'm hoping that it's a little bit of work. It's not just like lean back and take it in and have a conversation.
Yeah.
It's more of a sit up and pay a little attention. And I'd like to think that you'll get a little more out of this film because you have to do that.
Do you must see people using apps in their phones to do things that took tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment even 10 years ago. Do you see stop motion animation and these how do I say this? Do you see processes like stop motion animation making a comeback? Do you see more and more people being interested in these hand-built technologies?
Well, of course, artificial intelligence is going to replace all films
Indeed,
in
of
5
course.
years. But aside from that, stop motion's always coming and going. And here's what I find now. There's more young people who they have programs they can learn online that are doing stop motion animation. It starts with Legos when they're 7 years old. They're making puppets. I'm finding more and more young people are getting good at a younger age. So whatever the reason is, I'd like to think they're inspired by some of the things I've worked on, but they're doing it.
Yeah.
And so we're finding it's not so hard to find really good people because they're coming up
Oh, that's wonderful.
through the ranks.
Yeah.
You know, some of the most amazing animation in this film was actually done by people. It was the first time they were full animators. You know, someone was at 19, someone was 22, but they've been doing it since they were kids. And so that's kind of a really good news thing, that regardless of the overall success of the features, I think there's going to be young people coming up forever. They like the direct tactile effect of touching a puppet and moving it, or clay, or aluminum foil. You can animate dolls with stop motion. As far as the features themselves, this is also a good time because of streaming and the competition. There's more productions than there's ever been of all types.
Yeah.
More traditional stuff, but risk-taking things. And stop motion's a little riskier than, big budget CG films by major studios. But we can always do it for a lot less money. Not cheap, but a lot less. And with streaming, you get a better chance to find your audience. It doesn't have to be we win the weekend football contest against all the other features from Marvel.
Right.
So there's this film. Guillermo del Toro has a beautiful version of Pinocchio coming out. Aardman has never quit. They always find a way to keep going, and they're doing a sequel to Chicken Run and more. So I'd like to think stop motion's going to stick around for a good while now.
Well, I've been noticing how John Knoll is using off-the-shelf technology to rebuild some of the original motion control rigs for pennies on the dollar and using them in Mandalorian. So I get excited that new technologies are making all these old technologies that we used to, thank God we don't have to play with a video toaster anymore, right? I'm curious about scale. You were talking about Oogie Boogie, which is just an unbelievable scale puppet in Nightmare. Buffalo Belzer, is that his name?
Yeah, Buffalo Belzer
shows up and is a absolutely gargantuan scale in the movie. Did that present some interesting technical challenges? You had to build puppets at multiple sizes for him?
Just like the old King Kong, where there's a couple of sizes, and none of them too big for full body. They had to build a giant hand for Fay Ray to be put in.
Yeah.
Probably a few other, like a face, I think a close-up face, different scale. Kind of the same deal. At a certain point, when the puppets get too big, they become too unwieldy, cumbersome, just almost impossible to bring to life by hand. So most of Buffalo Belzer is not huge.
Oh, okay. I for some reason I was like, is there like a really big one of these?
But okay, he's not too big, but we found some special lenses, some German lenses that worked especially well to make him look big.
Oh, wow.
People are always developing new things, and our DP Peter Sorg is German, so he knew about them.
Yeah.
So that was part of it.
Was it there? I'm curious. Everyone watching content about films these days can always, I think, redound to this idea that films are easy to make and that the lenses and cameras have all been solved. And so I love the idea that you're making this film and you're like, oh, it turns out there's a German lens that'll lend this particular cast to this. Like, it is not solved. It is always a process, right?
And we tried some other miniature lenses and things, but they just couldn't deliver. But we found lenses. There's traditional trickery to denote scale, the speed that the characters move, the effects you put around them. But we definitely had to build some overscale things. We have an overscale from the neck up, faces of him, not gigantic, but big enough that we can go in for a close shot. It doesn't fall apart. And then we had 2 hands built that are gigantic because our standard size of the puppets, like Wendell Wild, they're 7 to maybe 10 or 11 inches tall. And there's scenes where they've been scooped up by Belzer and they're in his hands. Well, we didn't want to comp those into the hands. We built hands. So they're amazing feats of engineering. It's hands and wrist, and we put them on motion control movers to move them up and down, but all the fingers and everything else are hand animated. Oh. Beautifully done. This guy, Jerry the Genius, designed them. And those, those shots sell the others.
Yeah.
Very well.
Right. Okay, of course.
Like, one special effect, like a icy puddle being broken by a car, water splashing, tells you the whole street.
Dude, the icy puddle being broken by, Mitch Romanowski worked with you on Peach and Nightmare, and I remember working with Mitch and him telling me about animating beer for weeks. Sloshing around in the glass and all the challenges, and I watched that tire hit the puddle and cause the water to splash, and I jumped around the room. It was beautiful, beautiful shot.
We're always looking for like the telling detail, because if you put the details everywhere, it costs too much, people don't notice anymore.
Henry, I am glad that film being canceled did not stop you from making movies. I'm curious if you're already thinking about the next project, or are you really enjoying having wrapped this one?
I'm very much enjoying having wrapped this. We hope we already have a lot of good response from the critics. We hope that continues. We hope people watch it. If they do, if it's perceived as a success, then making another one may not be that difficult. And there are a couple of things. There's another project with Neil Gaiman. It depends what week I talk to him. Sometimes he's very much in favor. I want you to do this. Da, 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 da. And other times he's not so sure. But there's something with Neil. I think it's his best book. And I already put in a lot of time in years past. Ocean at the End of the Lane. Yeah. I'll just say it. I've got designs. I've got 70-page treatment, and that would be the best thing I could do with Neil. And then I got the rights back to the Shadow King from Disney.
Amazing.
To my original story. It's darker, and a little more like this than like a Disney or Pixar film. So I got to stay healthy because these things take a lot out of you, and it wouldn't be bad to do another one, because I've got a lot of people who want to still work with me. Strong stories, that's the bottom line. It's not worth it to put all the effort in if you don't have really strong stories.
And I particularly love the darkness. I particularly love the complicated and scary aspects, because kids' movies should have that complexity. The ones I grew up with, I felt like they did.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I mean, Walt Disney knew it, and then it kind of got lost in a lot of cases. But, people were terrified going back to, Snow White, she's dead. Right. And the witch takes the potion, turns old. That's a shocking, frightening thing. Pinocchio, the earlier ones, he was really into it.
Yeah, Bambi's really dark. Henry, thank you so much for bringing these beautiful puppets.
Well, wonderful to see you again.
Work. I want when you do start up again, I want to come visit the set. I want to. I'd love to visit and see the people building all these things.
You'd be more than welcome, and we'll let you know if we get something up on its legs.
Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah.